swear you don't want me like every other person." He said it like a statement, like a fact he was still getting used to. Adiz didn't even look up from her book. "No," she said, "I don't." The library was quiet enough that he could hear the rain beginning outside, could hear his own pulse doing something embarrassing, could hear the particular silence of a girl who had just reduced him. Him. Kim Seo-jun, heir to the third largest conglomerate in South Korea, the boy whose name alone opened doors that had never been opened for anyone else, to nothing more than a person standing awkwardly beside a table, uninvited, unwanted, and completely unable to leave. He should have left. He didn't leave. Let's go back 3 weeks. Because the story doesn't start in the library. It starts on a Monday morning when Kim Seo-jun walked through the front gates of Westbridge International Academy in a car that cost more than most families made in a year, and every head turned, the way they always turned, the way they had always turned for as long as he could remember. And he felt absolutely nothing about it. That was the thing no one understood about being him. It wasn't exciting anymore. The attention, the money, the particular electricity that moved through a room when he entered it. It had been exciting once, or maybe he'd just been too young to know the difference between excitement and performance. Now it was simply the weather, simply the condition of his existence. People turned. People smiled too wide. People said yes before he'd finished his sentences. He had everything. He was bored by everything. And then he saw her. She was sitting alone on the stone steps outside the main building, not waiting for anyone, not on her phone, not performing the carefully constructed casualness that most students performed when they wanted to look unbothered. She was genuinely unbothered. There was a book open in her lap, and she was eating an orange, pulling the segments apart with total concentration. And she was the only person in the entire crowded Monday morning courtyard who had not looked up when his car pulled in. Not once. He noticed because he always noticed who looked. It was a reflex, the constant, unconscious tracking of attention that came from a lifetime of being watched. Everyone looked. The scholarship students, the faculty, the groundskeepers, even people who wanted to seem like they didn't care would steal one glance, just one, just to confirm that yes, he was real, yes, he was that. This girl didn't look. She turned a page, ate another segment of orange. Seo-jun stood at the top of the steps for a full 10 seconds, which was 9 seconds longer than he'd ever stood still waiting for anything, and felt something he hadn't felt since he was very young and the world was still capable of surprising him. Curious. He was curious. He asked about her that afternoon, discreetly, or what passed for discreet when you were him, which meant his friend Jinho found out everything within an hour. Her name was Adiz Okonkwo. Nigerian. Father was a diplomat. Mother was a literature professor at the University of Lagos. She'd transferred from an international school in Abuja at the start of term. Top of her class in 3 subjects. Had already corrected 2 teachers and been right both times. Kept mostly to herself. Didn't follow anyone on social media, and her own account had 11 posts and no location tags. She sounds difficult, Jinho said. She sounds interesting, Seo-jun said. Jinho looked at him with the expression of someone watching a very smart person make a very avoidable decision. He approached her on a Wednesday. Library. Free period. She was at a corner table, her braids loose over one shoulder. 3 books opened simultaneously in a way that somehow looked organized. He crossed the room and sat down across from her without asking. The way he sat everywhere, the way he moved through the world, like space was simply waiting to accommodate him. He set his iced coffee on the edge of her open book without thinking. Habit, that was all it was. She looked at the cup, then at him, then back at the cup. She picked it up with 2 fingers, placed it carefully on the table beside her book, and smoothed the page he'd wrinkled. "I'm Seo-jun," he said. Like that explained the intrusion. Like that explained everything. "I know who you are." Her voice was even, unhurried. She had a particular quality of stillness that he was already finding maddening. "Everyone knows who you are." "Then I have the advantage." "Do you?" She looked at him fully for the first time. Direct, unbothered. like she was reading the fine print of something before deciding whether to sign. Or do you just think you do because people usually pretend you do? He opened his mouth, closed it. When was the last time that happened? I was going to ask if you wanted to. No. He blinked. I haven't finished. You were going to ask me to dinner. She turned back to her book. Or to something your family is sponsoring that you'd call casual, but isn't. Or to walk somewhere visible so people would see and talk about it. She paused. The answer is no, but thank you for asking. She said thank you like she genuinely meant it. No cruelty, no performance, just no. Clean and complete and entirely without apology. Seo Jun sat there. 5 seconds. 10. The library clock ticked. Someone coughed 3 tables away. He picked up his coffee, stood, walked away, and then did something he had never once done in 17 years of always knowing exactly what he wanted and exactly how to get it. He stopped at the door, turned back. She wasn't watching him leave. She was already reading again, already gone, already back inside whatever world lived between those pages. And the sight of it hit him somewhere low and unexpected, like a door he hadn't known existed had just swung quietly open. She doesn't need to watch you leave, something in him said. She didn't need you to arrive. He walked out into the corridor and thought about her for the rest of the week. For the rest of the week, she was the first thought he had in the morning and the last one he negotiated with at night. She was in the margins of his notes, in the pause before he answered questions in class, in the particular way he now noticed who was and wasn't looking at him when he entered rooms. She never was. And somehow, impossibly, inconveniently, completely, that was the most attractive thing anyone had ever done, which is how Kim Seo Jun, heir to a billion-dollar empire, the most untouchable boy at Westbridge International Academy, a person who had genuinely never heard the word no directed at him with any real conviction, found himself standing beside a library table 3 weeks later, saying the only honest thing he knew how to say, I swear you don't want me like every other person. And Adis Okonkwo, without looking up, without missing a beat, without giving him even the small mercy of pretending this was a difficult thing to say, said no, I don't. And he sat down anyway, because for the first time in his life, no didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the only beginning worth having, what money cannot touch. He tried again. Of course he did. He was not, he told himself, obsessed. He was simply a person who finished what he started. It began small. On Monday morning, Adis arrived at her desk in AP Literature to find a first edition copy of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Purple Hibiscus sitting on top of her notes. Rare. Signed. Worth more than most students' monthly allowances. Seo Jun had his assistant source it overnight from a collector in Abuja. He didn't examine too closely why he'd specified Abuja, why it had felt important that it come from her continent, from somewhere close to where she was from. Adis picked it up, turned it over, read the inscription slowly, with the kind of attention she gave everything. Then she walked to his desk on her way out, set it down gently without a word, and left. He stared at the book for the rest of class. Tuesday, he sent her a playlist. He'd spent 2 hours on it, which he would take to his grave, mixing Burna Boy with Nell, blending Afrobeats into Korean indie in a way that he hoped said, I've been paying attention to you, without screaming it. He shared the link with a single message. No obligation. She listened to 4 songs. He could see it from the shared link. 4 songs, not 3, not 2, and then she replied, nice try. Good taste, though. He smiled at his phone longer than any self-respecting person should have. Wednesday, he did something that surprised even himself. He didn't try anything. He just sat 2 tables away from her in the library during free period and read. Not performing reading, actually reading, because being near her somehow made concentration possible in a way it hadn't been in weeks. Something about her stillness was contagious. She had a way of existing in a space that made the space feel more real. He didn't speak to her. She didn't speak to him. But once, just once, he looked up and she was already looking, and neither of them said anything, and she turned back to her page first. And he felt that small, Stupid moment like a hand pressed flat against his chest. Thursday was when everything cracked open. It was late afternoon. Gray light coming through the tall library windows. Most students already gone to dinner. Adiz was at her usual table, alone, earphones in, had bent over a notebook. She was writing something, not notes. He could tell by the way her pen moved, slower and more deliberate, like she was choosing every word. Seo Jun walked in, saw her, and almost turned around. Instead, he crossed the room and sat down across from her. She pulled one earphone out without looking up. "You're doing it again." Sitting in a library, orbiting. She finally looked at him, one brow raised. "You've been orbiting me all week." "I've been in the same building as you." Seo Jun, his name in her mouth, patient and precise, did something to his spine. "What do you want?" He should have had an answer ready. He always had answers ready. He'd been trained for boardrooms, for interviews, for the particular performance of confidence in high-stakes rooms. But she was looking at him with those direct, unhurried eyes, and his prepared lines dissolved completely. "I don't know," he said, and it was the most honest thing he'd said in months. Something shifted in her expression. Softened, barely, just enough to be visible if you were paying the kind of attention he was paying. "Sit down properly," she said. "You look like you're about to run." He sat. She put her earphone back in, went back to her writing. He opened his book. The library settled around them, quiet and warm, the kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled. 20 minutes passed, maybe 30. Outside the windows, the sky went from gray to deep blue. Then her pen stopped. She pulled both earphones out and looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen from her before. Careful, considering, like she was making a decision she hadn't fully made yet. "Why me?" she asked. "There are girls at this school who have wanted your attention since September. Pretty girls. Girls who'd make it easy." "I know. So why are you here?" He thought about giving her something smooth, something that sounded good. Instead he said, "Because you looked at me like I was ordinary, and I've never felt ordinary before." He paused. "I think I needed to know what that felt like." Adiz studied him for a long moment. Then she did something that stopped his heart completely. She laughed, not a polite laugh, not a performative one, but a real one, small and surprised, like he'd caught her off guard. She pressed her hand over her mouth immediately, like she was annoyed at herself for it. "That," she said, lowering her hand, "was actually a good answer. Don't sound so shocked." "I'm a little shocked." "I noticed." The smile stayed at the corner of her mouth, the ghost of a smile he was beginning to think about more than was reasonable. The distance between them across the table felt suddenly very specific, very measurable. "I'm not going to make this easy for you," she said. "I know. I mean it. I don't do easy." "Adiz." Her name felt different in his mouth now. Not a word, something else. "I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for a chance." She looked at him, picked up her pen, went back to her notebook, but she didn't put her earphones back in. Friday changed everything. They'd fallen into a rhythm without deciding to. Same library, same hour, opposite sides of the same table. It had become the part of the day Seo Jun looked forward to most, which said everything about how thoroughly she had rearranged his priorities without even trying. It was raining outside, the kind of heavy, dramatic rain that made the whole world feel smaller, more enclosed. The library was empty except for them. The lights were warm. Her braids were pulled over one shoulder tonight, and she was wearing an oversized cream sweater that made her look softer than she usually let herself look, and Seo Jun was spending a significant amount of energy pretending not to notice. He was failing. "You're staring again," she said without looking up. "I'm looking. What's the difference?" Staring is rude. Looking is, he searched for the word, appreciative. She looked up at that, met his eyes. The rain hit the windows. Neither of them spoke for a moment that stretched past comfortable into something else entirely. "Come here," she said quietly. 33. His pulse spiked. What? There's something in this passage I want to read you. She turned her notebook slightly toward him. Come here. He stood, walked around the table slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. She didn't. He pulled the chair beside her and sat, properly beside her now, close enough that he could smell the shea butter in her hair, close enough that their arms nearly touched on the table. She pointed to the page. He looked at the words but couldn't process a single one of them because she was right there and the rain was loud against the glass and her shoulder was almost against his and the whole world had narrowed to this small warm circle of library light. Read it, she said softly. I can't. Why not? He turned his head. She turned hers at the same moment, just slightly, just enough. And suddenly they were close. Properly close. The kind of close that has a weight to it, a gravity, a question built in. Her eyes dropped to his mouth for just a second, came back up. His heart was doing something completely unreasonable. Adiz, he said, her name barely a sound. Don't, she whispered, but she didn't move. Tell me to move back. A beat. 2. The rain. I can't, she said, and it came out almost like a confession. He lifted his hand slowly, slowly enough that she could stop him, slowly enough that it was a question, and tucked a single braid back from her face. His fingers brushed her cheekbone. She closed her eyes for just a moment, like the touch was something she'd been bracing against and had finally stopped bracing against. When she opened them, something had changed in her expression. The careful distance she always carried was still there, but there was something behind it now, warm and visible and no longer entirely hidden. He leaned in. She didn't pull back. The kiss was soft, barely there, just the press of his mouth against hers, gentle and questioning, giving her every exit. She was still for one suspended second. Then she kissed him back. It was nothing like he'd expected. It wasn't the triumphant, electric thing he might have imagined months ago when he first decided he wanted her. It was quieter than that, warmer. It felt less like winning and more like arriving somewhere he hadn't known he was trying to get to. She pulled back first, just slightly, her forehead almost touching his. That was a mistake, she said, but she hadn't moved away. Was it? She exhaled slowly. Her hand, he noticed, had found the fabric of his sleeve at some point without either of them deciding it. I don't know yet, she admitted. That's the most honest thing you've said to me. She pulled back properly then, looked at him with that full, reading look, but softer now, something unguarded in it that she usually kept locked away. Don't make me regret that, she said quietly. I won't. I'm serious, Seo Jun. So am I. He held her gaze. For the first time in a long time, I'm completely serious. The rain pressed against the windows. The library light held them both. She looked at him for a long moment, measuring, deciding, that brilliant, precise mind of hers, working through something his money and his name and his careful planning had never been able to touch. Then she picked up her pen, but this time she shifted her chair, just slightly, just barely, closer to his, and said nothing. And that was everything. December arrived the way it always does in boarding schools. Suddenly, completely, with the smell of cold air through old corridors and the particular restlessness of students who were almost home, but not yet. Christmas lights appeared in dormitory windows. The courtyard fountain was turned off for winter. Everything felt like it was holding its breath. Seo Jun felt it differently this year. He felt it in the way he woke up earlier than usual, the way his first thought every morning had quietly, without permission, become her, the way he'd started reading Nigerian literature at night, not to impress her. She'd see through that immediately, but because understanding her world felt necessary in a way he couldn't fully explain. He'd finished Purple Hibiscus, started half of a yellow Sunday, lay awake at 1 a.m. with the book on his chest, thinking about how much of a person exists in the stories their culture carries, and how little he'd ever bothered to learn about anyone else's. Adiz was changing him, quietly, completely, without even trying. That was the most terrifying part. They didn't talk about the kiss, not directly, but something had shifted in the geography between them. The careful, measurable distance she always kept had compressed into something new, something that felt like closeness even when they were silent. She still pushed back on everything he said, still argued about literature with the focused energy of someone who genuinely believed ideas were worth fighting for, still looked at him sometimes like she was reading terms and conditions before signing anything. But now, occasionally, her hand would find his arm when she was making a point. Now she'd steal sips of his coffee without asking, the way you only do with someone you've stopped performing for. Now when he said something that genuinely surprised her, she'd look at him with this expression. Open, unguarded, almost reluctant, like she hadn't meant to let him see it. That made his entire chest ache. He was falling, not the sharp, dramatic falling of someone who wants a thing they can't have. The slow, irreversible falling of someone who has already arrived somewhere and is only now beginning to understand the altitude. The second kiss happened on a Tuesday. They were in the East Corridor after the last class of the day, walking without a decided destination the way they'd started doing. Just moving, talking, the school emptying around them. She was telling him about a phone call with her mother the night before, something funny her mother had said about the way Adiz described the Korean food she'd tried at a restaurant off campus. And she was laughing, that real laugh, the one she couldn't always contain, the one she sometimes covered with her hand. And Seo Jun stopped walking. She noticed after 2 steps and turned. What? Nothing. He was looking at her in a way he'd stopped trying to hide. You're just, he shook his head slightly. I'm just what? Extraordinary. It came out simply, not a line, just the truth, stated plainly, the way she'd taught him truths should be stated. Adiz looked at him. The laughter faded into something quieter. The corridor was empty. Late afternoon light came through the high windows in long gold bars, catching the edges of her braids, the curve of her jaw. She crossed the 2 steps between them, took his face in both hands, unhurried, deliberate, entirely on her terms, and kissed him. This one was different from the first. The first had been tentative, a question. This was an answer. Her hands were warm against his jaw, her mouth certain, and he brought his hands to her waist and pulled her in gently, and she let him. And for a long suspended moment the whole school, the whole December, the whole world outside those tall windows ceased to exist entirely. When she pulled back, her eyes were still closed for a second. Then she opened them and looked at him with that expression, the unguarded one. And this time she didn't try to close it off. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. I'm in. She said it like a decision she'd been working toward for weeks and had finally fully made. I don't know what this is yet, but I'm in. He exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. Yeah, he said. Me too. She stepped back, smoothed her sweater, picked up her bag from where she'd dropped it against the wall. Don't make it weird, she said. I would never. You're already making it slightly weird. That's just my face. She laughed again, that real one, and started walking. He fell into step beside her. Their hands swung close, without touching for a few steps, and then hers found his, and their fingers laced together like that was where they'd always belonged, and neither of them said anything about it. The week before winter break, the school held its annual formal dinner in the Great Hall. Long tables, candlelight, everyone dressed up and performing the version of themselves they wanted to be remembered as before the semester ended. Seo Jun wore a dark suit. His friends found him immediately, pulled him into the usual orbit. Loud, expensive, easy. He smiled at the right moment, said the right things. He was good at this. He'd been trained for rooms like this since before he could tie his own shoes. But he kept finding Adiz across the room. She'd come with Kayamika, her best friend who visited on weekends. She was wearing something deep green that made her skin glow like something lit from within. Her braids swept up tonight, the line of her neck visible in a way that made coherent thought difficult. She was laughing at something Kayamika said, head thrown back, completely unaware of how the entire room had quietly rearranged its attention toward her. Or maybe she was aware and simply didn't care. That was so completely her that he almost smiled just thinking it. He excused himself from his table halfway through dinner. He crossed the room. Kayamika saw him coming, looked between them with an expression that said she knew everything and had opinions about all of it, then conveniently decided she needed water from the other end of the table. Seo Jun sat in the empty chair beside Adiz. "You abandoned your table," she said, not looking up from her plate. "My table was boring." "Your table has the head boy and 2 prefects at it." "Boring," he repeated. She looked at him sideways. The candlelight caught her eyes, that warm gold he'd first noticed on the roof terrace. She was wearing small gold earrings that caught the same light. He was aware of how close they were, shoulders almost touching, the noise of the room creating a strange privacy around them. "You look," he started. "Don't. I was going to say, well rested." "You were not." "Okay. I was going to say beautiful." He held her gaze steadily. "Because you are incredibly, distractingly beautiful. And I think you should know that I have thought so since September, and I'm tired of not saying it directly." Adiz was quiet for a moment. A small color rose in her cheeks, barely visible, but there, and it delighted him completely. "You're impossible," she said. "You like it." "I tolerate it." "You like it." She pressed her lips together to suppress the smile and failed entirely. "Seo Jun." "Adiz." "Stop saying my name like that." "Like what?" Like she stopped, shook her head, picked up her glass. He leaned slightly closer, just enough that his arm pressed against hers, warm through the fabric. She didn't shift away. "Dance with me later," he said quietly. She turned to look at him. They were close, close in the way that had become familiar, close in the way that still managed to feel new every time. The candlelight moved between them. "I don't dance," she said. "Neither do I, technically." "Then why?" "Because I want to hold you in front of everyone," he said simply. "And I want everyone to know." Something moved through her expression. Something she didn't immediately lock away. "Know what?" she asked, softer now. "That you chose me." His voice was quiet just for her. That the girl who said no, who should have kept saying no, who was right to say no, decided I was worth a chance. He paused. "I want that to be visible. I want to have earned something visible." The room hummed around them. The candles flickered. Adiz looked at him for a long, full moment. That reading look. But without the armor now, without the careful distance. Just her. Just him. Just the truest version of whatever this was. "One dance," she said finally. "One dance," he agreed. They ended up dancing for 4. She told him she didn't dance, which turned out to mean she danced only when no one she needed to impress was watching. And because she'd stopped needing to manage his impression of her, she moved freely, easily, with the same unhurried confidence she brought to everything. He kept his hands at her waist. She kept hers at his shoulders. They talked through 2 songs and went quiet through the other 2. The comfortable quiet they'd built together in libraries and roof terraces and rainy Friday evenings. The quiet that didn't need filling. At the end of the last song, she rested her forehead briefly against his shoulder. Just for a second. Just barely. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Just kept his hands gentle at her waist and let her have the moment exactly as she'd chosen to take it. The last night before winter break, they sat together on the roof terrace. It was properly cold now, the kind of cold that made the stars look sharp and close. She was bundled in a thick coat, a scarf wrapped twice around her neck, her braids tucked in. He'd brought 2 cups of hot chocolate from the kitchen, which she'd accepted without comment because they were past the point of commenting on the things he did for her. They sat close together, shoulders touching, looking out over the city lights below. "Lagos is loud this time of year," she said after a while. "Christmas is everywhere. My mother puts lights on everything. The windows, the gate, the dog." "You have a dog?" "Had. He died last year." She said it simply, but he heard the small weight in it. "What was his name?" "Oga." She smiled at the memory. "Because he acted like he owned the house." Seo Jun laughed, a real one, low and genuine. She looked at him when he laughed like that, he'd noticed, like she was collecting evidence. "I've never had a pet," he said. "That explains some things." "Does it?" "People who grow up with pets learn faster that the world doesn't revolve around them." She said it lightly, no real sting in it. The way she teased him now, comfortable and warm. Are you calling me spoiled? I'm calling you a work in progress. She tilted her head toward him, slightly. There's a difference. He looked at her. She was looking out at the city, her cup of chocolate in both hands, her breath making small clouds in the cold air. The lights below caught the planes of her face, and she was so completely herself, so entirely, unapologetically present, that something in him settled into a certainty he hadn't expected to feel this completely. I don't want to go home, he said. She turned to look at him. Seoul. Yes. He paused. It's loud there, too, but differently loud. He looked down at his cup. He searched for it, here is where you are. Adiz was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and took his cup from him, set both cups down on the ledge, and turned to face him properly. She reached up and pushed his hair back from his forehead the way he sometimes did for her, slow and deliberate. Her fingers were cold from the night air. He didn't care even slightly. I'll be here when you come back, she said simply. It should have been a small thing. It wasn't. He brought his hand up to cover hers where it rested against his face, turned his head slightly to press his lips to her palm. Slow, warm, deliberate, she let out a soft breath that disappeared into the cold air. When he looked up, she was watching him with that open, unguarded expression. No distance left in it, no careful armor. Just her, just completely, finally her. He leaned in. She closed the last of the space between them. This kiss was nothing like the first two. The first had been tentative, the second certain. This one was something else entirely. Slow and deep and unhurried, her hands framing his face, his arms pulling her in until there was no cold air left between them. She kissed him like she'd made her decision completely and had no interest in half measures. And he kissed her back like she was the first real thing he'd held in a very long time. When they finally pulled apart, she stayed close, her forehead against his, both of them breathing the same cold air. "Seo Jun," she said softly. You know this changes everything." "I know. My father will have opinions. I'll be respectful. My mother will ask you impossible questions about literature. I'll study." She pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were warm and real and full of the particular brightness that appeared when she was trying not to smile and losing. "You're going to study literature," she said, "to impress my mother. I'll do whatever it takes." She shook her head slowly, that smile breaking through completely now, wide and real and unguarded. The smile she didn't perform for anyone, the one he'd been working toward since a Wednesday afternoon in September when she'd picked up his coffee cup and moved it like he was ordinary. "Kim Seo Jun," she said, "the richest boy in school." "Studying literature," he agreed, "for a girl who said no. The best no anyone's ever said to me." She laughed, pressed her face briefly against his neck. He held her in the cold December air above the city lights and felt, for the first time in his entire carefully managed, endlessly performing, exhaustingly visible life, completely, quietly, entirely found. Outside, the winter stars held their positions. Below, the city moved through its evening without knowing. And on a rooftop at Westbridge International Academy, the richest boy in school held the girl who had said no, the girl who had made him earn every single moment of yes, and understood, finally, what it meant to have something that money had never touched. Something real. The end.